Welcome to another episode of Clinic Success Secrets, podcast where we uncover the strategies and insights that drive clinic growth and elevate patient care. I'm your host, Tommaso Dwyer, founder of Clinic Success Partners, a medical digital marketing agency dedicated to helping clinics serve more patients and achieve the success that they deserve. Today's guest is Tiffany Ryder, founder of Red Flag Hero. Tiffany is a healthcare advocate, reform strategist, and a dynamic communicator with over 20 years of experience, driving change in clinical care, public engagement, and policy innovation. From her unique medical education in Germany and the US to her extensive experience in rural emergency care near Washington, D.C., Tiffany has an incredibly broad and distinctive lens on healthcare challenges and opportunities. As a sought-after speaker and founder of Red Flag Hero, she's committed to empowering patients, reducing healthcare costs, and advocating for meaningful reform. Let's uncover and hear about Tiffany's incredible journey, her insights into the healthcare system, and actionable strategies that clinic owners, such as yourselves, can implement for better patient and business outcomes. That being said, Tiffany, it's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's always funny to hear yourself talk in the third person, but thank you for the introduction.
I'm stating objective truths. But
Awesome. Yeah. Happy to be here today.
delighted to have you here. With regards to where you are today, I will definitely. Yeah, do you know what? Let's park today for a minute and share what your journey was. How did you get to the position that you're in today? I know you were a very high level cheerleader back in the day. There's some correlation between the athletic life and the entrepreneurial life. Yeah, tell us all.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost one of those, how long do you have? But, you know, I, I, I think that my interest, I guess, and my how I got here actually started just from being a poor kid that didn't have health insurance in a small town somewhere in southern US, and seeing, sort of what that situation is like, what it's like to be in a community where, people don't necessarily have access to, basic things like primary care or non-emergent care in general, and the way that they deal with those realities. Um, and then, really moving from that space to that time when I was an NFL cheerleader and had the opportunity to volunteer with the USO, seeing troops who had been injured in various foreign conflicts, and seeing the way that the medical system could work. Um, when I was at the USO, I was introduced to people at Walter Reed. It was Walter Reed Army Medical Center at the time, and was able to get an internship there working with amputees who were coming home with injuries, had had amputations. A lot of them had traumatic brain injuries and other things going on. And it was really my first experience seeing the healthcare system do what the healthcare system can do when it's, hyper focused on actually providing great care to patients. And, that's not an endorsement of, all military or, government, organized care, but I can say, quite honestly that, in this particular situation, I mean, they were offering great, beautiful care. It was so cool. My office, my little desk was in the occupational therapy, physical therapy unit. And so it was a really cool space where I would, get to communicate with surgeons and, again, physical therapy, occupational therapy, recreational therapists, which I didn't even know was a thing, who would, come in um, and we would basically take these young men and women who were about, similar age that I was, early 20s, early to mid 20s, and who were coming over. And I got to see their journey from being in the hospital bed, right as they arrived to, we did a bike ride where we went from Pennsylvania to DC, using adaptive equipment and all of this stuff. And so it was a very inspiring experience, right? To see all of these healthcare professionals, working together and communicating well and really just doing everything they could for these patients that greatly needed them. And at the time um I was dancing and teaching dance and, doing everything to do with, my cheerleading career. And I said, okay, well, when that settles down, right? Like when I'm done with that next year or whatever, I thought it would be a short-lived experience. Then I'm going to figure out how to get into medicine. And what ended up happening was I moved overseas. I was in Frankfurt. I continued dancing in Frankfurt for a team there for many years after that. But, eventually found my way back into medicine and really had a heart for really recreating, I guess, that same experience that I'd had at Walter Reed many years ago. And turns out it's not that simple in the real world, but but that's sort of how I got here.
Nice. And again, obviously, when you did get into medicine, even from then, there's a quite a big jump between there and where you're doing, today, with Red Flag Hero. What was so what changed, but what was a catalyst for you wanting to start Red Flag Hero? Based on where you were at within the
Yeah.
medical space, and what's that look like? What was the trigger?
Yeah. It's funny because, when you look back, you can see things differently than looking forward. And, when I went into medicine, I actually, started in Frankfurt and then, wanted to make sure that I could practice in the US. And, it's all very administratively overwhelming in any area of medicine, as we all know. So I ended up coming back to the States, actually ended up going to PA school instead of medical school and wanted to be in the emergency department because those were the people that reminded me of my childhood that I thought needed the most help. Um, and it's interesting because I thought it was gonna make this huge impact in the ER. I thought it was going to be, you know, doing traumas and, saving lives and doing all this big important work um and the place that I found that I was able to make the biggest impact on someone's life wasn't in those spaces, not those emergent traumatic events. It was in the small places of talking with the patient and realizing that the reason, they were there in a diabetic crisis or something is because they really didn't have access to their diabetes medication or they didn't understand how to use their medication because their health literacy, their ability to understand what was going on in their bodies or how to navigate the system like wasn't clear to them. And so, in my heart, really the reason I was going into medicine was to help people, not to feed my ego. So I said, okay, well, this is how I help people is maybe I just try to tell them about this. Maybe I just try to educate them on how this works or, what they can do to get the medicine they need or whatever the situation is. And as I started taking time to talk with patients and it just explain to them in plain language how to take care of themselves in the constructs of the system, like they really got it. Like they really understood. There was no inability to translate, medical knowledge or system knowledge to normal people walking on the street. It was achievable. And and I got a lot of positive feedback from that, right? So, you know, what I was finding before I was, really focused in on patient education was that I would go in for my shift and I would call the patients that I had seen like the last week and I would say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And, you know, some patients were doing okay, but a lot of patients weren't doing okay after I discharged them. And when I started digging into, well, what happened? Like, is the antibiotic I gave you not functioning like I expected? Or, what's the deal? It was, I would say, even more than 9 times out of 10, almost 100% of the time, it was, well, I tried to get in with my primary care and I can't find someone to see me. Or I tried to pick up the medication, but they said they don't take my insurance and I don't know what to do, right? It was systems issues.
Yeah.
And as I started focusing more on educating the patients on how to take care of these things, those phone calls got a lot easier because people were doing better. And I think that was the first spark. And, throughout that time, I started looking for more answers. I read a book that I recommend everyone read, clinic owners, patients, everyone. It's called The Price We Pay by Marty McCary, who it is looking suspiciously like maybe the next commissioner for the FDA. And, this book, really talked about some of those systems issues, talked about, nonprofit hospitals that don't always, look like nonprofit hospitals when you dig into it. Talked about, um, predatory medical practices that were preying on patients and things that could be done differently, simple solutions. And I think reading that book was a turning point for me that said, well, what is direct primary care? What do you mean I can pay in cash for things? Like, what do you mean there are other ways to do things than just what I know? And then taking that inspiration and then taking a look at, the medical care I'd received in Europe and the way that, there are different ways to do things, like, really, really changed, what I thought was possible and eventually became what is now Red Like Hero, so
I love that. And look, I had taken note there of that book, The Price We Pay. So
you gotta read.
it's a fun, lighthearted read for Christmas. To get stuck into.
He just came out with another one, called Blind Spots, which is interesting and even more aligned with, what we're doing, basically just talking about different, like, historical medical treatments that, either took a long time to go from, like, what we know to being implemented in the public space. But anyway, both books, great read for the Christmas holiday.
Okay. I would take adding that to my Amazon list. Uh, with regards to that, then obviously, we've talked about the past, we've talked about your journey. Today, Red Flag Hero. Tell us all about it and tell us how you're going to reform healthcare. Revolution.
Well,
How's it
yeah.
finished?
Oh, lofty goal there you set out. I mean,
Am I?
that is what we're trying to do. So, we're in an early stage right now where we're working with clients, we're doing things, we're putting content out, but it's not clear what it's going to evolve into, and I'm totally okay with that. But at the core of what we're doing is we're saying, we have specialized knowledge of the healthcare industry, of clinical scenarios, of how things work. If my child or my parent gets sick, that child or that parent, despite what they already know, is going to be well positioned to get the care that they need because I understand how the system works. And my phone blows up on a regular basis with, "Hey, my mom's in the ER. Like, what questions should I ask? My husband's really sick. Where should we go to get evaluated?" And not everyone has a friend or a family member that understands how the system works, how medical care works, how the clinical questions should be answered. And that's really what we're looking to provide. And what we've noticed is that We have a team of people. My partner, Sim Stillerson, is an industry expert who's involved, from understanding what a, pass-through transparent PBM looks like on the employer side, to how to run data analytics for healthcare. So I've got, experts on the system on my team, and then I've got, a whole host of clinical voices, that I can lean on. And so what we're looking to do is take really complex stuff and present it to patients, so that they understand how to do what they need to do to navigate the medical system, present it to policymakers, right? Just because someone is an amazing voice, in our government, that doesn't mean that they understand how to ask all of the questions that they need to ask. And to be a voice for business owners. So we love, this idea of taking a clinic that's offering, like a direct primary care clinic that's offering amazing services to their patients, but maybe, they want to focus on the medicine and they don't necessarily, want to focus on creating lots of ancillary information to help their patients better understand all the different things that they need to understand. And so we're working within these constructs to say, how do we take really complex information, make it simple, and make it engaging and interesting so that people are interested in utilizing it. So,
And what's the, I suppose, the big vision? We're going to fast forward 5 years down the road. Red Flag Hero has been blowing up, and
yeah.
it's taking the world by storm. Um, I had a great conversation with a guy, Jimmy Yen, yesterday, and we talked a lot about the concept of beginning with the ending in mind. When running a business, a lot about purpose driven business, and obviously it's clearly what you're doing. What does the end look like for the Red Flag Hero business?
Yeah.
In the grand scheme.
That's such an easy question for me just because I don't know what the beginning looks like, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what the middle looks like, but I definitely know what the end looks like. And for me, the end is that, maybe instead of just access to the people I have access to right now, which, I had 2 million views of, content that we've put out in the last year. Okay, so that's fantastic. I'm very proud of that. That's wonderful. Uh, but I want 200 million people seeing this message of your doctor's doing the best they can. Um, but, they can't do it by themselves. Here's the information you might want to, collect for them and provide to them. Here are the questions you can remind them of, that you can ask so that they can counsel you in a more effective way. So mostly I'm looking to get more voices involved. I love partnering with people. I love collaborating. I love the idea of getting varying perspectives. I'm a huge advocate of thoughtful discourse, and the world is gray because I think that that is the nature of science and medicine and culture and reality. Honestly, is that there isn't right and wrong. There's lots of gray. And so 5 years from now, if I had, the ability to scale that message of you have responsibility for yourself. You are the one who benefits from different medical treatments, but you're also the one who can be harmed from them or from not engaging in them. And you have a personal responsibility to engage in your healthcare, and you can. And that's not a bad thing. That's not an adversarial relationship. That's positive for everyone. Um, but doing that at scale is important. And I also have a special interest, a passion to help people who are in those decision making capacities, right? To help them ask better questions. Right now in the US, we're having, a lot of discussion about pharmacy benefit managers. It is a hot topic that I am not going to get into here, right? But imagine being in a position where you get to, vote yes or no on, different health policy impacts that that impact millions of people, that impact billions of dollars for good or for bad. And you have all of these competing interests with financial interest, right? Behind whether you say it's good or bad, behind whether you vote yes or no. And I think that's a really vulnerable place to be in and a scary place to be in where you can't necessarily trust the information that you're getting. And 5 years from now, I hope to be involved in those conversations without a financial incentive. I have bias, of course. Like I have things that I think I have healthy skepticism, we'll say, of, different industries, and I think that's good, and that's my bias, but I'm happy to say that's my bias, but I'd love to see us more involved in those conversations as sort of an independent, advisory, whether it's, again, to decision makers or to the patients themselves.
I love that. And with regards again, bring it back to the root inspiration, we'll say, for you getting into this. You obviously became a bit disenchanted with the whole insurance side of things, the fact that a lot of people aren't getting seen to, there's a delay, all that kind of thing. That obviously brings up a two topics that I'd love to hear your thoughts on, which are obviously the direct primary care model and the crowd health approach, health shares and so on. But
Sure. Yeah.
starting off with direct primary care, what is it specifically about that you believe can make it a very attractive option for clinic owners?
Yeah. So speaking of bias, right? Let's just start by saying I'm a huge direct primary care fan, and I didn't set out to be, honestly. So I'm happy to share this personal story that when I went back to school, um, after dancing for so long and decided it was time to grow up and get a big kid job, right? And I had gone to PA school. I was basically moving from a full-time position with health insurance that was, you know, th- adequately paid and all of that to being a poor student in my 30s. And, um, and we were required to have a very comprehensive health insurance plan, specifically because we were rotating in the hospital. There's lots of, communicable diseases and what have you. We didn't know it was going to be COVID at that time when I had to choose my insurance plan, but it was. Um, and and I signed up for the insurance and looked at the deductible and I said, "I'm never gonna pay this. Like, I'm never gonna pay this." I exercise, like, I do the best I can to take care of myself. I don't have any chronic conditions, and I'm never gonna meet this. I mean, I don't even remember what it was, but it was like a 10,000 or $12,000 deductible. But, what if I get sick? Like, what am I gonna do? And the answer is, I'm not going to go to the doctor and pay $500. I'll just stay at home and die quietly. So, is there something in between that, right? And I didn't know if there was. So, I start Googling, I start looking around. I'm also a little like oppositional, we'll say, at times. And I'm just not going to sit, like, I just didn't want to I didn't want to engage with healthcare because it's just such a dumpster fire sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, and I said, "Okay, someone has to have more than 1 star on their Google review." I don't know who that
Yeah.
is, but certainly this exists in the world. So I start Googling
Somewhere.
around looking for some sort of reasonable customer service and something that, like, had some transparency on pricing. And it's big Google, and I end up finding this clinic, and I called the clinic and I said, "Hey, you've got, 4.7 stars on Google. I'm not sure what you're doing, like if you're paying people for reviews or whatever, but everyone else is like below 2 stars. How do I like become a patient? Are you accepting patients?" They were. That was already weird that they were accepting patients without that. Sure. And I said, "Here's my insurance," right? Like, what?
Just, ew.
That does Do you take my insurance? And they were like, "Oh, no, we don't take insurance." And I was like, "Well, how do you get paid?" Like, I don't understand. And they said, "Well, what we do is you just give us I think it's $70 a month, or it was $70 a month at the time. You give us $70 a month, and then when you get sick, we see you. And I said, I'm confused. I don't- like
Yeah.
So, do you charge me actually, because it was such a foreign concept, and they said, "No, no, no, literally, that's it. It's that simple." And I said, "Okay." So I'm like, "Oh, $70 a month, that's kind of a lot. I have no income coming in now. I'm a student." But then I did the math, right? And I'm like, "Okay, what's 70 times 12?" And I'm like, "Oh, wow, this is so much cheaper than my deductible. I'll do it." And, what I now know many, many years later is that this is a direct primary care practice, but I didn't find that out until I read Marty's book, The Price We Pay, where he talks about direct primary care. So as I'm reading this book, 5 years later, I say, or what, however many years it was, I reading it and I said, wow, that sounds sort of like my doctor, who I love. And so it was like just the perfect perspective for me to fall in love with this model. One of the things, that I love about this model is, as a student and then again as an emergency medicine clinician, even as an emergency medicine clinician, which is like a professional, real job, I didn't have PTO. I didn't have um, the ability to just take off, 3 hours in the morning to go to the doctor. So if I had something like an infection, or I needed to see the doctor for some reason, I had to miss 12 hours of work. And it's not just 12 hours of work. I mean, it's like any job where you work shift work. Well, if I call out, I now have to find someone to cover me. I
I see. Yeah.
breath on my team. I lose, a day and a half, 12 hours of pay. One of, maybe 3 or 4 shifts that I'm working that week. It's a big deal. And but because I had direct primary care and insurance wasn't involved, I could just call my doctor's office and say, "This is what's going on. I don't know if it's appropriate, but do you need to see me? Is it possible for you to treat me for this over the phone? Can it wait till tomorrow?" And I could have those conversations on the phone or via telemedicine. And there was no pressure on me to go in because they're able to spend a half hour having that conversation before I go on shift rather than having to, being essentially forced to ask me to come in because they need to be paid because they need to pay their staff and need to, keep the lights on. And so, direct primary care has a lot of advantages, I think, for patients that allow the doctor or the clinician to act in the patient's best interest, right? If they thought I needed to come in, they would have had me come in because clinically that made sense. But it gives options to make care more convenient and to make care accessible, and at least in my opinion, at a much cheaper price point than even paying your deductible. So I'm not sure exactly what the original question was, but that is the
No,
story
that was it.
I buy it.
That's the what benefits. There's a lot of benefits there. I mean,
Yes.
better service, cheaper, faster turnaround. You're not waiting for months, and as you said, you can avoid the trips half the time by just picking up the phone and not
Yep.
getting ghosted.
Yeah.
It's it's a compelling case. And then on the other one, how can health share models, like crowd health, help clinics provide more cost effective care? Could you share a bit more about crowd health?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not a crowd health expert. I'm not a health share expert. I'd actually not even heard of it before a few years ago. Uh, uh, but I had a podcast that I was running for a while, and I'm getting ready to start up actually. So I'll make sure
Oh,
you have
what was it called for shameless plug?
Get Med Savvy. We are rebranding and restarting it in January, so I'll let you know what that is. We can put it in the show notes. But I had this guy on my podcast. I interviewed him because he just had this, I mean, really crazy sort of business model. It was like totally, outside of anything I'd ever heard of before. I'd never heard of a health share. And, I'd seen his content, I believe on LinkedIn or something, and he was describing what they were doing. And I was like, wow, that's just a really like creative solution that I've never heard of. I should have this guy on. And, in the background of that, one of the hallmarks for why we started Red Flag Hero was that I would post just questions, just like interesting stories I would hear, or stuff controversial, sometimes content on LinkedIn, and people started messaging me and asking questions. And one of the questions that I kept getting that I just didn't have any answer to was, "Hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I only have 5 people on my staff. You talk about direct primary care all the time. I get it. Like, I've already, like, signed up, I'm doing this for my staff, but what do we do for catastrophic coverage? Do you have anybody that you can, like, refer me to get, health insurance coverage for if I need to go to the hospital?" And at the time, I was like, I really don't know what to tell you, right? I have a lot of great, um brokers in my network, benefits advisors who are doing really cool stuff. But doing it for those tiny groups is really difficult. And I just didn't have any information. And anyway, so then cue Andy. So I see Andy Schoonover's content, and I was like, wow, this looks really, really cool. Little too good to be true, but really cool. I should have him on my podcast and just ask him about it. And so, he tells me this story. I mean, he told me many stories that blew my mind, but he tells me the story and he says, we're not health insurance, but what we're doing is basically we have, an administrative cost. Like there is a cost to us having lights in our offices and, people that answer the phone and, the app that we run our business through. And so, that's like one cost that we have. And and then we have basically this other pool of funds is the way I understood it, right? That we'll ask our members for. And that money goes to funding healthcare bills for all of the people who are in this crowd, this community. And I said, well, that sounds really cool, but like, does it work? Like, what's the deal? And and he said, it's again, like, not regulated by the insurance commissioner, but, we fund 99% or something of our claims. And I said, "Well, my health."
So
Right, it's insane. I was like, "Well, my health insurance company doesn't approve 99% of claims, so, tell me more." And he tells me this story. He tells me this story of a member who needed a particular procedure. It's a relatively common procedure. I think the member had atrial fibrillation, like AFib is what people call it, basically where your heart isn't beating regularly and it
yeah,
just sort of goes on this tangent and starts beating super fast. And
yeah,
some people take medication for it. Sometimes the recommendation is that we go in and we sort of snake this electrical device and
yeah,
we zap the part that's being naughty, um, so that, then things are business as usual and the heart's going well.
yeah,
So I think the patient needed this particular procedure to be done and had gotten a quote for it and was, sort of scheduled to go have it taken care of. And it was some astronomical cost, as you would expect, from US healthcare system, like, it was ridiculous. And so he's telling me that they reached out to the patient and they said, "Hey, you're welcome to go get care however and whatever whatever you need, like, this is fine. But also, like, we made some calls, and there's this other place that you could get it done that, has amazing results." And, it was like a just another medical center in another state, but it would require that, you travel and all of that. And, that's like something you might be open to if we were willing to facilitate it and do all of the legwork for it. And anyway, so then he tells me this story. They fly the patient first class, first class air flight to, wherever it is he needs to go. They put him up in this amazing hotel. They pick him up in like a Land Rover or something. Yeah, I mean, this story's like 2 years old. I don't remember the details, but it was
First
really
cut.
cool. Basically, they were like, "Let's, we can give you like the white glove treatment the whole way. Have a driver."
That is ridiculous.
And, like, at the end of the day, the cost was minimal. Like, the cost was, like, I think the crowd, right, from that pool of money that, people are donating to pay other people's medical bills, like, the crowd had saved, like, over half the amount of money, like $40,000 or something
Yeah.
ridiculous. And I was like, I mean, I was just floored. So I'm like, I'm sitting in your seat, right? I'm the host of this thing, and I'm just like, wow. Like, this sounds like a
Yeah.
deal. So my open enrollment comes up, like, the next year, and I tell my husband, I'm like, We have to do this. Like, this is
Mm.
the coolest thing ever." And so we did. We dropped our health insurance, like, by choice, and our participant had been participating in this crowd as crowd health members, and I just can't tell you, like, when I open up my bank statement, and I see the administrative fee, it's like, less than I spend on coffee a month, like, it's not a lot.
Negligible, yeah.
And I'm like, "Whatever, okay," like, I don't pay attention to that. But when I see you know, the 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 second charge, like, I actually get excited. Like, I actually get excited because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, let me go see, like, who did we help this month?" And, we
And you can see it, yeah? You can see.
yeah, so you could see, especially, I follow them on X and on LinkedIn, and so, sometimes the patients will, I mean, obviously, like, the patients will give, permission for them to share their story, and, we have a little one who is like a high needs infant who's in the crowd, and he, gets all the surgeries he needs and the care that he needs, and we get to see pictures of this happy baby, and they post on like, "Oh, thanks so much to the crowd for funding, our little ones, whatever the procedure is that he needed that
Yeah.
month." And it just feels like it feels so good. I feel like it's a gift that I get to contribute to other humans on this planet. Um, and I still think it's kind of weird that that's even possible, that, you
Yeah.
know, that someone has created this opportunity where I can feel good about basically, like, the money that I'm throwing away, like, throwing out into the universe for healthcare cost because it's, like, actually benefiting people and helping people. And so, I don't know. It's been a good experience for me. I don't know if all health shares are that transparent, and do as good of a job, negotiating the medical bills on behalf of their members and communicating, transparency and being wonderful, but, mine is, and I feel really good about that.
I love that. And with these, I suppose, is there any intention is not loaded in any way, shape, or form, but do you plan on sort of marrying this sort of advocacy into Red Flag Hero? Is there a scenario where you see you can sort of potentially start your own one, or is there any kind of interlap that you kind of see being possible?
That's a really great question, that I was just discussing with my business partner last week. I said, our goal is really to take this complex information, medical systems navigation, clinical navigation, healthcare, take this info and get it to patients. But we want patients who are willing to look at something in a different way, right? Like the patient who's like, "Look, I'm gonna do what my doctor says. It's what I've always done. This is what I'm supposed to do." Like, that patient maybe isn't gonna be the most receptive to, ideas about how to engage more effectively. But the patients that are involved in these health shares, I think specifically are our people, right? Like, these are people who are saying, "We don't like something about the way the traditional world is working, the traditional healthcare system is working, and we want to do something different, and we're willing to engage in that manner. And I think those are our people. So, like, the way that I see the best interaction is, us getting involved and, perhaps being able to work within these communities and share the things that we're learning and share the questions we think need to be asked with a group of people who are like, heck yeah, let's go. And so, I think that's really exciting to me as an opportunity, and as an opportunity to really zero in and also get feedback and find out from patients because I'm only one person, even on a 12-hour shift. Like, maybe I see 20 patients, but I want to get feedback, as much feedback as I can. What is the thing that you need help with? Do you need to know when telemedicine is appropriate and when it isn't? Do you need to know how to figure out if you should go to urgent care or an emergency room? Do you need to know why I think, as someone who owns 0% of, a direct primary care
Yeah.
practice, has never practiced in primary care, like, why am I, yelling from the rooftops that you should be signed up for primary or for direct primary care? And so, getting that feedback, I think, is essential for refining the message. And it's something that I'm looking forward to, if we do get involved with any of these health shares that are really innovative and doing good work.
I love that. And I suppose we've talked the past, we've talked present, and then the future. I suppose the question is on a bigger span, bigger scope. Are there any trends in healthcare in general? I think we've talked about this, um, but I'll leave my own opinions out of this. But uh, you're the medical professional, not me. But what are some trends in healthcare in general? I mean, it's 2025, 2026, and beyond that particularly excite you.
Oh, the end of that question is
Yeah.
interesting. Um, Honestly, I would say this sounds a little dark, but stay with me. I think the trend that is the most impactful and the most, I don't want to use the word exciting, but impactful. We'll stick with that. Is the rising costs of healthcare and the increasing difficulty of accessing healthcare. I think that humans in general, in my experience, we are all um, apprehensive and a little inherently scared of change. Well, it's just, change can sometimes be amazing and wonderful, but for whatever reason, our brains have decided that change is scary.
Yeah.
And I really truly believe that if we weren't having these horrific increases in price and horrific decreases in access, that we would just float along with mediocre care and, mediocre uh, skimming from the top and essentially taking advantage of vulnerable populations. We would just continue doing that forever. And so when I think about where we're going, when I think about leaving a night shift at, you know, 8 in the morning and seeing, someone who doesn't have anywhere to sleep, sitting next to someone holding a Louis Vuitton bag with a Mercedes, fob, and then seeing those same individuals, both of them, when I come in for the next night shift 12 hours later, um, horrific things like that are happening, I think have the potential to change everything. Um, and that's what I think we need, right? I think we need a system that is not just failing the most vulnerable in our population. We need a system that is failing everyone so that people stand up and they say, we can't we can't look away anymore. We can't just say, well, the hospital in my neighborhood is functioning just fine. Like, we really are nearing the point where I think, your average person who maybe, wouldn't have time to notice otherwise is really noticing and is saying, maybe I will look at a direct pay surgery center and explore this. Maybe I will consider if a health share is right for me and my family. And I think those are things that 15 years ago we wouldn't have been willing to even look at. I know I wouldn't have. And here I am, like, uninsured by choice, and I'm really happy about it. And so I guess, that is the first part of it. I'm looking forward to the awakening. I'm looking forward to people saying, maybe we're willing to look at hard things. Maybe we're willing to look at different solutions and evaluate them, and then to see those practices grow. I'm so excited to see the direct care movement grow, where I am the patient and I am also the customer. And that conveys a different type of relationship. And I'm not anti-health insurance. I am, I'm not anti-pharma, but I'm just looking for, I guess, more accountability and more accountability from the grassroots movement, from people saying, well, how is this medication different than this other medication? And why should I run it through my insurance when it costs $200 when I run it through my insurance? But when I ask the cash pay price, it's $40. So I think just having those conversations and having a populace that is more aware of the nuance and asking more questions is really exciting to me.
I think so many thoughts come to mind here, and I have to admit it's an interesting frame uh, with this, but I would also agree. I mean, I always say sort of lukewarm is the most dangerous place you can be
Yeah.
because complacency kicks in, and obviously from an evolutionary standpoint, humans are petrified of change because the ultimate, well, AI, but whatever.
Yeah.
We're good pattern recognition machines, and historically, someone eats a red berry, they die. You probably shouldn't do that. We are more hardwired to avoid the stick than to run towards a carrot. More afraid of failure and loss. We are excited towards growth. So I do believe I would agree that I think there's an action threshold that must be reached in order to trigger change. And if it's a painful action threshold, but it's a net positive overall, then so be it. Assuming that there's an alternative that works,
Yes,
which
and that is I see I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because that is really the difference, right? Is that I think that's why I can be hopeful about maybe things getting a little bit worse as they get better, is because I'm in the thick of this where I'm seeing solutions. I am seeing, I know that a lot of your audience are these clinic owners. Like, it's not easy to do something like to jump out of the box and be willing to do something scary like start your own business. But people are recognizing the opportunity and the ability to actually serve patients, which is what we all went. We all studied medicine because we want to actually have a positive influence on the world, and people are doing that. And at least from what I am seeing, it is working. Right? We are providing better healthcare, and the solutions, they're not perfect, but they really are filling in the gaps. And so because there are these viable alternatives, which again, they're not going to be perfect for every situation, but they can certainly fill some of these stop gaps and allow us to recalibrate. And I'm really hopeful and excited about that.
yeah, it's like like a self-healing organism in its own way.
Yeah.
Um, there's a have you ever heard of the concept of anti-fragility? Have you ever heard of this?
No, I haven't. Tell me
Like
more.
ours. So he's a investment banker originally, but this guy called Nassim Taleb, but he wrote this book called Anti-Fragile. He wrote another one called Skin in the Game, another one called black swan. Interesting. You might have heard the black swan.
I have
Swan.
heard the black swan one, yes.
Yeah.
I read it though.
It's good. So for anyone listening, there maybe this is sort of what happened with COVID. The idea of the black swan was um, the black swan event is basically something that hasn't happened before, and our tendency as humans to underestimate the probability of that. Um, the reason it's called that is because up until the 1800s, people just assumed that every swan in the world was white, and until they went to, I think it was Australia, they discovered the black ones, and that changed everything. Um, the idea being just that is that just because something hasn't happened before doesn't mean it can't happen, and they do happen occasionally. But the anti-fragility concept. So the reason why this is interesting for me within what we're talking about is a lot of people tend to assume the opposite of something being fragile, easy to break, is robust. It doesn't break. He makes the case that that's the point, that that's not the case. So if something that's fragile is something that when stress is put on it, it cracks. Think of like a vase or an egg, or I don't know, cup of tea. Something you put pressure on, it breaks. Something that's robust might be like a rock, something that you put pressure on, it doesn't really move. But something that's anti-fragile is something that actually gets stronger when there's a stress put on it.
Interesting.
So the perfect example of this is the human body. To a certain point, you rip the muscles and they get stronger. Wolf's law or Hooke's Wolf's law. Yeah, you put strain on a bone and it gets strong proportional. The point being is that there are certain things in life that have anti-fragile tendencies when you get the correct amount of stress put on them. And again, the example that they give here is what I'm thinking of is the healthcare system. In this instance,
Yes.
break it just enough that it triggers growth or change, and it gets stronger as a result. So I know.
Oh my gosh. And that is exactly, wow. Now I suppose I'm going to read the book, but that's exactly it, right? The human psyche is the same way, right? You can put stress on it and you grow. You put too much stress and it breaks, just like a bone.
Exactly.
And I believe, and I'm forever the optimist, so I could be wrong, but I believe that what we are seeing is exactly that with the healthcare system, that it's enough stress that we're paying attention and that we're creating space for these entrepreneurs to come in and change everything about the way we think about it. And I think it's positive.
Yeah, it's exciting. As I said, if there's pain is feedback, and if you don't get feedback, you're not going to trigger change. So I think it's exciting. The fact that even having this conversation for me is inspiring, because it's great to see that people are taking that action and doing the great work that like you're doing with Red Flag Hero.
Thank you.
So getting this message out there, a lot of people, myself included, well, you can tell from the accent I'm not American, but they're legitimately ignorant to this, and not in a
Yeah.
condescending way. Ignorant in the truest definition, that they literally have not been informed. And what sort of solution do you think is there for um spreading these alternatives? Is it just a load of content? Is it does it need to be governmental? How do you get this message out there?
It's such an important question that I don't know that we have an answer to. I think that if we look at the way that ideas have been spread historically, there's a lot of support that says, look, people pay attention to the things that they need to pay attention to because they need it. And, grassroots movements are a big deal. I do believe, again, not anti-pharma, not anti-insurance, but I do believe that those industries have done a really, really wonderful job of uh, of insulating themselves from criticism from traditional media outlets. For example, I know this is not true, and this may come as a surprise to you. because it is only allowed in America and New Zealand. But pharmaceutical companies spend a lot of money on direct to consumer advertising here in the US, just for example. Um, and, when uh, my husband pays half of our household bills, I pay half,
Mm.
he pays half, right? So I am incentivized to care when he complains about me leaving my shoes in the middle of the doorway because he pays half of the bills, right? Um, and I think that there is something to if pharma is, paying to have the lights on at the television station, there could be an incentive to not cover alternatives to pharmaceuticals, for example, right? So I think that there are limited impacts maybe in, what we will see coming from what we traditionally think of as driving these sorts of movements. Like, I don't know if we will see, television or newspapers or, our traditional media pushing these alternatives when
Yeah.
perhaps there are financial conflicts there. I think that the same could be said about governmental agencies, I don't know, but it seems like, that when, our elected officials must be reelected and, campaign finance is what it is, that, there are also influences at play there. So I think that the most viable way to get the message out on what is working and what is not working will likely end up being independent media, grassroots movements, word of mouth, social media, things like that. But I hope very much that once we reach sort of a critical mass of information and interest, that then it becomes undeniable, right? Like then, large outlets start noticing these fringe movements, these crazy thoughts, and cover them. And I say that stories are the best way to talk about concepts and ideas. And I believe that by sharing, my story to the people that I come in contact with, that's impactful. I believe that Red Flag Hero, putting out my story and other people's stories to even more people, that's impactful. And, my hope is that there will be a ripple effect and that the people that need to hear this will hear it. And the people who will never listen, that'll be okay. So I'm not sure if that answers your question,
It
but
does.
but I think independent media and I think we all have a responsibility to be talking about these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason I'm smiling, I literally was having a conversation with a physician. Uh, I won't mention where they're based, but uh, US based, literally, I think until about 3 minutes before this podcast, about the she was she was talking to me about the DC advertising for pharmaceuticals in the US, and as a European, as a European person, I've not, again, to use another term used by Asim Taleb, I have zero skin in the game, so I can't speak authoritatively. This is as a neutral third party looking in. Um, it's interesting on the outside looking in. I remember things about 8 or 9 years ago. First time I was in the US. That was the first thing that jumped out. Everybody was saying, "Oh, what's the difference between Ireland and America?" Like, I've never seen ads for drugs like this. You know, so whatever, again, we'll keep politics out of it, but whatever happens on that front, whether that continues, whether it doesn't, that um to quote another book, James Clear in Atomic Habits, he says, if you're going to change behavior, you need to disincentivize the negative behavior or habit that you're trying to change, coupled with uh, making the alternative easier. So I think there is a hybrid approach there of incentivizing the behavior that you believe is best. In this case, it's direct primary care and other models, and perhaps disincentivizing ones that you don't want. That's my interpretation. I'm not a medical professional.
And, I do think that, it's to this point, I think it's important to point out, that when you see those ads, I mean, I'm guessing you'll agree with me, but I'm curious, right? It's not like you see the ad, the pharmaceutical ad, and you think, "Oh, yay, I wanna take that medication," right? So I always thought, like, I would hear again, I lived in Germany, and I would hear people talk about this and how okay, now I'm self-censoring, hold on. They would say how silly it was, we'll use that for our therapy. No, I guess that they would have choice thoughts about, like, "Why the heck are you guys putting pharmaceutical ads on your TV?" And I was like, "What do you care? Like, who cares?" Like,
Yeah.
nobody looks at the drug commercial and says, "Ooh, I really wanna take that drug." Has all those sugary things at the end. And so I went a large part of my adult life just believing that this was, like, an innocuous practice. Uh and then, come to find out and, the RFK Jr. is, someone else who is talking a lot about this, and I saw something and he was saying, "Well, like, when they're paying the bills, like, what if that was the cause? I don't know." And I said, "Wow, never thought about that before." But the more you dig into, you know, the way the way business works and the incentives that are placed on the media, the more it's like, well, I can't say that that's absolutely happening, but what if that is happening, right? It just brings to mind a question, and I do think it's good practice to look at when your country is doing something unique. It's not inherently good or bad; it just is. So when America is doing something different than the rest of the world, like but from, whether it's red dye number 3 or it
Yeah.
right, which I know you guys are quite familiar with, or it's pharmaceutical practices, you have to ask the question, "Well, what do I think about this? Are we doing it differently and we're proud and this is bringing more good to the world, or are there potential, negative aspects to that?" And I don't know, but that's a question that I believe we should be asking ourselves.
Yeah, as I said, it's very, very different to Europe. It's if you're
Yeah.
wondering how much to censor myself, but yeah, as as you said, if you're getting ads saying, do you get tired in the evenings, and stating basic human physiological is like, oh my god, I do every day. That's crazy. Or do you get hungry when you haven't eaten? Oh god, it's um that's crazy. It's like it's speaking to me. So, um, inevitably there's going to be some impact, whether it's good or bad. You know, um, that remains to be decided. Because you could obviously make the counter argument that people do get educated on things. So, there's nuance. I'm not saying one thing's good or bad. I'm just saying as you said, it's interesting when one country has a tendency to have a certain behavior that isn't common amongst others. It just do your due diligence. Do you think it's beneficial to you as a whole, or do you think it's negative to you? Um, leave that sort of yeah, leave that to yourself. Always yeah, just think. Because as you mentioned, there's a good chance there's a lot of treatments that you wouldn't even hear about if they weren't advertised. So again, there's pros and cons to everything. Um,
I
but
totally
it's definitely
agree.
interesting.
And that is I mean, it's so perfect that this is how we somehow organically ended up here, but,
Yeah.
like, that is exactly what we're doing at Red Flag Hero, right? I'm not here to say, "You should do this," or "You shouldn't do this," like, I want people to just ask the question, and what I'm finding is that, historically, we have fostered a culture, and by we, I mean clinicians, I mean Americans, I mean the healthcare system, like, we have told patients to sit down and shut up and stay in their lane, and, we will tell you what to do, and then we expect you to do it. And I just don't think that that is serving anyone anymore. It's not serving us as clinicians. It's not serving us as patients. And I think that, that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to say that we don't believe in pharmaceutical ads. We're trying to say, like, there are multiple sides to this. Have you thought of it? Here's some viewpoints, and now you consider it and decide what you think, whether it's a clinical scenario or medical navigation or whatever that is. And we are interested in aligning with partners who are okay with that. And, if you're a direct primary care clinic and you don't believe that there is any alternative view other than direct primary care and everyone should be doing that and anyone who says anything different is evil, then like you're probably not a great partner for us or you play with the health share, right? Like I don't know what the answers are, but I want people making informed decisions and I want people understanding that there's nuance and I want to talk about it. So,
Love that. At the end of the day, empowerment kind of comes through. Yeah, empowerment comes through education and the ability to make decisions. And you're doing a great job with both. So I mean, love the mission. With that being said, Tiffany, any last bit of advice for, I suppose, clinic owners that we haven't even talked about the actual business development side of things, how you're getting business and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, separate conversation. But if you had any advice for, I suppose, a clinic owner that's maybe burnt out, they'd be working maybe in a hospital situation. I know you do a lot of what you do is more so focused on the patient side of things. Fully aware of that. Uh, but the clinic owners, just for a second, what advice would you have to someone who is, say, a clinic owner? They're burnt out, um, and they just don't know where to go from there. Uh,
oh,
what-
I love that question. Okay. So I would say the following, and it's true, like most of my work is patient facing, but I live in this space, right? Like my day-to-day interactions when I go to conferences, when I talk to people, like these are the people that I'm talking with. And if I asked a clinic owner to believe anything that I've said, it would be that there is help in the world and there are people who are just rocking it. Like I'm not saying that it's easy to have your own practice. And, if you're in a traditional practice, maybe you're working as a physician and you're employed by a healthcare system. Or maybe you're in private practice and you're dealing with the headache of sending 30% of the money that you have to a billing company to try to extract as much, billing from the insurance companies because that's what you have to do to keep the lights on. Like whatever it is, um, I would say there is a community of people. There are, tons of people figuring it out and people are having success. So those people also are the type of people they tend to be, entrepreneurs. They tend to have this sort of like abundance mindset of like, hey, like the system is so messed up that there's so much room for improvement and growth. There is, room at the table for all of us. What can I do to help you? And my advice would be reach out to people, find people that are doing stuff that you think looks cool and, message them or pick up the phone and just say, hey, like, I don't know what I don't know. Like, would you be willing to like just have a conversation with me? And the answer is going to be yes. I personally did this. I mean, burnt out, miserable, just like I'm not serving people. I'm, tired all the time. I'm overweight. I'm sad. My patients are sad. Like, what do I do with my career? And someone told me, they said, why don't you just start writing online? And so for me, that was my path. I'm not saying it's everyone's path, but I just started posting on LinkedIn about how burned out and miserable I was because I was putting $10,000 band-aids on my patients and I didn't feel like I was actually helping them. What else can I do? Right. And someone eventually recommended Marty's book. And then that changed everything. But I think that just knowing that there's a community of people out there who are doing great things and that those people want you to succeed. They want to help pull you out of whatever negative situation it is encouraging. And I believe that it's true. And so I'm always happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. It's Tiffany Ryder, Ryder. Reach out to me. But just putting your story out there, making yourself a little tiny bit vulnerable by saying, I'm not 100% sold on what I'm doing and I want to do more. And I think that the response you will get from the universe and the community will be positive.
I love that. It's a great note for us to finish everything on. Tiffany, so where can people find you? You got LinkedIn. We'll include that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Redflaghero.com. Where else? That's
Yep.
it.
Those are good places to start. The only other thing I would say is I I really, really love writing and putting out content. So, check us out on Substack. We're on Substack as well. I'm on X under Tiffany Ryder. And yeah, look out. We're gonna start this podcast. Not sure what we're gonna call it, but it's happening. And I'm always happy to connect with people, say hello, and introduce you to whoever I can, or resources.
Sounds great. Well, if you need a guest, definitely love to chat again. So, Tiffany, it's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Tess.